Hello and welcome to the Art of Caro. As you've probably seen from the title, in this video we are going to be making a pair of pants. And I don't really know if they can be qualified as slacks, but that's what I've been calling them in my head. For the pattern I adapted the Folkwear 240 Rosie the Riveter patterns for their slacks. You can do some other stuff as well, but I made slacks, and I've already done these pants once and I made some changes, and I'm going to show you a video on them now. So the changes I made was that I put in a placket in the front with a zipper, and then I made the pockets deeper by like 7 centimeters I think, and I also added cuffs at the bottom of the pants because I was sort of going for a formal sweatpants look, if that sort of makes sense, and it totally works. I love these pants. They are made out of a cotton linen blend, and they are fairly cool in the summer, and they have been decent in the autumn. It's just gotten cold enough that I wanted to put on long johns underneath, but I think I can wear them the entire winter with long johns underneath, and that's going to be great. But I also want to make some more pants and maybe some cozier pants as well. So I bought this really lovely flannel. It's cotton flannel, and on the outside the weave is not this like fussy flannel weave. It's just like a regular weave. I don't know if you can see it. And then on the inside it's all fuzzy and cozy. So I hope it's going to stay that way. I'm going to make the plain weave the outside and the fuzzy part the inside. And they are thin enough that I probably will need to wear long johns with them if I have to go out in snow. But otherwise they are going to be a pair of cozy pants, and they are going to be kind of eye-catching, but hopefully not too much. I kind of want to go for a... Like when I was a teenager, I was really into the goth and emo and punk rock fashion. Not that I had energy to acquire those clothes and dress like that, but I admired the style from afar, sort of, and I kind of want to do something in that kind of spirit. So we'll see how it turns up. I have an idea for like a pants chain thing, but we will see if the material will arrive by the time this video goes up, or if that will be a separate video. Anyway, I'm going to make some pants. Oh, and I wanted to mention those black pants. The thing is, I made I think the medium size of the pants, and they turned out to be too wide at the waist, but they were the width I wanted for the hips. So I took in the waist and I took it in too far. For some reason it worked on the mock-up but not on the actual pants. No idea how that happened. Yes, what I had to do when the waist was too small was let out the pleats at front a bit, and that I think affected the look a bit weirdly. So I fixed the pattern, so now the waist should be the right size. So we shall see if that is a problem again. Otherwise I'm happy with the rest of the pattern. So yeah, pants. Super excited. Let's go. I've cut out all the pieces for the pants. This is the pocket pieces, the one that's going to be against my leg and the one that's against the outside of the pants. These are the 4 pieces for the cuffs. These are for the placket opening. I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called in English. And the zipper is like the zipper placket thingy. This is the interfacing, and the waistband. This is the front of the pants and the back of the pants. So this is how it looks. A fly. That's the word I can come up with. The pieces are for the fly, the zipper fly. Why are words so hard sometimes? I'm attaching the front part of the pocket to the pocket opening and making sure that it's aligned, and I'm doing this right sides together. And then I'm sewing it down using the very narrow seam allowance that's recommended in the pattern. And then I'm trimming off the excess seam allowance and turning the pocket so it's wrong sides together on the inside. And then I'm making sure that fold is crisp and pinning it. And then I'm top stitching that opening of the pocket. So I want to do a French seam on the pocket, and as you can see on the instructions, that's not how they mean for you to sew them together. But I made this on the last one and it worked out fine. The only thing that's a bit tricky is that it's a 13mm seam allowance, so I have to be kind of careful with how far in I stitch, because I don't have a lot of fabric to work with. So I'm going to, I know sort of where on my presser foot a certain distance is, so I'm going to sew it just far enough in that when I turn it to the way it's to the right side out, just have to sew that seam. I don't have to trim off any excess seam allowance. So we'll see if that works out on this one as well, but as I said, I've done this before, it should be fine. I'm pinning together my pockets right sides together, and I'm making sure the edges are aligned. And then I'm sewing them using a 5mm seam allowance, and then I'm turning them wrong sides together and making sure that fold is crisp, and pinning that again so I can make a nice French seam. And then I'm sewing using a 8mm seam allowance. Then I'm pressing the pocket flat, and then I'm making the folds at the front of the pants, and then I'm making the folds at the front of the pants, fiddling around until I get it right. It was a bit complicated to make it align properly. And then I'm pinning them down to the top edge of the pants, and I'm also pinning down the edge of the pocket that is toward the side seam, and I'm basting down that edge of the pocket to the side seam of the pants, and then I'm basting the top of the folds to the top of the pants, and then I'm pressing that flat. Then I'm drawing out the darts at the back of the pants using the markings that's in the pattern, and then I'm using a ladder stitch to baste the darts so it will be easier for me to stitch them on the machine later on. I'm just going back and forth all the way up the dart, and then I'm pulling them together and tying a knot at the top to keep them in place. And then I'm stitching the dart from the top of the pants down to the
point of the dart, and I'm backstitching at the beginning, and then when I come to the point of the dart, I just I don't backstitch, I just pull out the thread, so I have a decent amount, and then I make a knot and hide the ends of the thread in the darts, and this is to make the dart more crisp. And then I'm pressing the darts towards the back seam of the pants. And here I'm going to be making the fly of the pants, and I'm using a instruction video from YouTube that I can't quite remember who has created it right now, but I'm going to leave the link to that in the description box below. So I'm not going to try to explain how I did it here, because I was watching the video repeatedly while I was making it, so I'm not really in any position to tell you how I did it, so please watch that video if you're interested. But I'm attaching one part of the fly to the pants, and just doing my best, following the video. I have my phone up with the video just out of frame for most of this. Here I'm top stitching that part you just saw, and here is the other side of the fly, and I'm just following the instructions again. And I went with a longer zipper. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning. I had a short one and a longer one, and I went with the longer one. It made it a bit more difficult with the seam allowance, but it also fit better later on than the shorter would have. So I probably need to change my fly pattern to make it slightly longer. I'm gonna keep that in mind for the next pants I make. More top stitching, and I'm switching between a regular press foot and the zipper foot. And here I'm pinning together the inside seams of the pants for both legs, and I'm pinning them wrong sides together and sewing down with a 5 cm seam allowance. And then I'm folding them right sides together and making sure that fold is crisp, and then I'm pinning it, and then I'm going to sew them down to make them into French seams, and that's what I'm doing now. And I'm using a 8mm seam allowance. And then I'm folding that French seam towards the back of the pants and pinning it down, and then top stitching it down. I can't remember what this is called. Here you see me watch that instruction video for the zippers while I'm snuggling with one of my cats. More zipper work. I'm just making sure to use the same seam allowance wherever the same seam allowance as are in the instructions for the pants, wherever I'm attaching the zipper to the pants, because the woman in the video is giving other seam allowance instructions, but that would mess up with my seam allowance in the crotch seam later on, so I'm just making sure that those are the same as the instructions of the pants. And here I'm pinning the crotch seam, and I have to cut into the seam allowance below the zipper to be able to make that work, but that's okay, we're going to cover that later on. And that was my cat knocking over my camera and then it happens again. Yeah, and I'm just pinning that crotch seam. Again, this is wrong sides together, because this is also going to be a French seam. It's lots of French seams in this video. Sewing with the 5mm seam allowance, attaching the crotch, and then I'm turning it right sides together, making fold lie nicely, pinning again, and sewing with an 8mm seam allowance to finish the French seam. And then I'm folding my seam allowance toward the side that will work best with the zipper fly, and then I'm top stitching that down. And when I come to the overlap of the inside seams and the crotch seam, the bulk is too much for me to be able to sew over, so I'm just jumping over that point, and then I'm going to go back in and sew that down by hand later on. Then I'm continuing with the zipper. I have to jump between how I attach the different seams of the pants and how I attach the zipper, and that's also in the instructions in the video that I watched. This is only the second zipper fly I've ever sewn, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. Yeah, and this is stitching that's going to be seen on the outside, and I had to sew on the inside first, so I could find that edge, and then I'm sewing that curve on the outside, being very, very careful. And then when I come to the point where the zipper attached to the crotch seam, I'm just doing a bunch of back and forth stitching to make it more secure. Then I'm trimming off that edge of the fly piece, and then I'm going to encase that raw seam with a cotton tape. I'm just laying that over the raw seam, and then I'm going to baste down the tape and then hand stitch the tape to the fly. This is just to make sure that the raw seam won't fray, and just make the zipper a bit more secure. And then I'm hand stitching down that crotch seam where I couldn't use the sewing machine. And then I'm pinning together the outer seam of the pants and stitching it down using a 5mm seam allowance. And this is the wrong sides together again, because it's going to be a French seam again.
I just realized I sewed the seam all the way down without leaving the gap for the cuff, so I am going to be able to pull the pants leg over my foot, so I'm going to have to seam rip it and fix that. But it will be an easy fix. It's just annoying that I forgot about it, because I literally thought about it before I pinned the pant leg, so I'm going to fix it now.
Yes, so I unpicked that seam that I sewed too far, left a gap for the cuff that's going to be attached later on. Then I've turned the pants the right sides together and folded the seam to make a French seam again. I'm just repeating what I've done on the other seams. And then I'm sewing that down using a 8mm seam allowance. And then I'm going to fold under the seam allowance for the opening for the cuffs. I've clipped into the seam allowance, and then I'm folding it twice, so I encase the raw edge of the seam allowance, and then I'm pinning that down. And then I'm going to go with the tricky bit, and here I'm going to fold the seam allowance toward the back of the pants. I'm going to pin it down, and then I'm going to sew it on the sewing machine. And this wouldn't work if the pants wasn't as wide as they are, but I'm going to keep moving the fabric onto this arm of my sewing machine that's meant for sewing like sleeves and stuff, and that will enable me to sew down the seam allowance all the way down to the end of the pants. But it's if I was taller, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. Then I'm sewing down those folded edges of the opening, and I'm backstitching at the end of the side seam before the opening to reinforce it. And then I'm zigzagging with a narrow zigzag stitch over that opening, as you can see, to reinforce it. And here I'm first folding over my waistband to show me where the fold is going to be, and then I'm attaching the interfacing. I'm using a woven cotton interfacing that is iron-on interfacing. Just touching it, making sure it's sitting properly, and then I'm folding the waistband right sides together and pressing that. And then I'm folding up the seam allowance on the inner edge of the waistband. I'm folding up the seam allowance there and pinning it down, and then I'm pinning the sides of the waistband. Then I'm sewing the sides of the waistband. And then I'm trimming the seam allowance and turning the waistband right side out. And pressing it together. And then I'm attaching the unfolded side of the seam allowance on my waistband onto the upper edge of the pants. And sewing that down, making sure not to catch the folded seam allowance on the other side of the waistband. And then I'm folding over the waistband, and look how nice it is that the seam allowance is already folded like that. It makes it so easy to attach it on the inside later on. I should have done this to my cuffs, but I wasn't so clever when I did that. I'm basting down that folded edge, and then I'm hand sewing it to the inside of the pants. And then I'm marking out where I want my button to be, and first I'm making the marking a bit too far out, and then I realize that and move my marking further in to the waistband. Marking out my buttonhole, and when I make buttonholes, I first do a running stitch all the way around the opening of the buttonhole, or like my marking, before I cut open the buttonhole. Then I test it with the button and see if it will go through, and first time I did that it didn't work here, so I cut it open a little bit more. And then I'm doing whip stitches around the edge of the opening, just to make it a bit more secure. And then I'm doing button stitches around the opening. I think it probably makes my buttonholes look a bit less neat, but I feel they make the buttonhole a bit stronger when I do the whip stitching as the middle step. Then I'm attaching the button, and it's a shank button, so it's very easy to sew it on to the pants. And this is how the zipper and the button turned out.
Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of belt loops for the pants, and I have to make a pattern for them, or I figured I would make a pattern for them. And the thing is, I've never done this before, and I've looked at a couple of things online, but I figured I can just make tubes and sew them on. The thing is, I want to be able to wear this belt with these pants, and the belt is slightly larger than the waistband. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure them after this, and then they are going to like be slightly larger than the waistband, and I think that's going to be fine. I'm going to try to pattern match, but it's not super important. Yeah, so I'm going to make the pattern after the belt.
So I'm drawing out a pattern, measuring against the belt to make sure I have the right length, and then I'm figuring out the width and doing some math and getting some help from Suko. I don't know how helpful this is, but yeah, that's how I did it. Here I'm just folding it up and testing out how it will work, and it looks good. So I start drawing out my pattern pieces on some scraps of fabric. I decided I didn't want to waste any larger bits of fabric, so I scrapped the idea of pattern matching. I just used all the small bits of scrap fabric I had, and here I'm cutting out my pieces. And here you can see that's all the belt loops, and I've already done a test version on the sewing machine and figured out how best to do it. So here I'm sewing up the long side of the belt loops. On the machine, and then I'm trimming off the raw seam allowance, and then I'm turning them the right side out. using a pair of tweezers to do that, and then I'm using a bookbinding tool to press them out. I didn't want to go to the sewing machine, so I just did it this way. And then I'm turning in one side of the belt loop on the short end, the seam allowance. I'm turning in that a bit, and then I'm stitching that down, like stitching together the edges. And then I'm attaching that folded edge to the waistband, and I'm attaching that a little bit above the lower edge of the waistband first, using whip stitches. And then I'm using running stitches just at the edge of the waistband to make it extra secure, going back and forth. And then I'm going to the other edge of the belt loop and folding in the raw edges there and sewing those together. I'm not sure my method is very good here, but it worked for me, so I just went with it. And then I'm using the belt to check how I should position my belt loop, and then I pinned it on the inside. Whip stitch that folded edge to the inside of the waistband a bit further down, and then just at the edge of the waistband again I did some running stitches just to make sure the belt loop was extra secure and won't come off. And here I'm pinning the cuffs together, and I'm going to pin the sides and the lower edge of the cuffs, and they are the right sides together. And then I'm sewing them. And then I'm trimming off the seam allowance and turning them right sides out. This is one of my cuffs for my ankles, and I have cut the pieces, so this is this one that's facing outwards are going to be with the non-fussy side, and the back piece is going to be the fussy side. And then I'm pressing the cuffs, making the edges nice. Yeah, the reason that he is howling at me is because he's an indoor cat who gets seizures occasionally, and I live too close to the road to want my cats to be outdoor cats. And he can't be an outdoor cat because he can get a seizure. But we go out using a harness, and he now at 11:16 at night want me to go out with him for a walk. So he's sitting at the door and howls. He can go for quite a while, and he can howl a lot longer than he's doing now. I mean the tone. He can hold it for much longer. I would show you with the camera, but he's going to stop if I go there and then return when I come back here. So let's hope he gets tired of it soon. Yay, he stopped howling. Mwah! Are you going to be nice to me now?
He's purring. Can you hear him purring? Mwah. Mwah.
Just finishing up the other calf. Still getting some affection from Sokka. And then I'm sewing some gathering stitches onto the lower edge of the legs, and I'm doing 2 rows of gathering stitches, one within the seam allowance and one a bit above the seam allowance, and that row that's above is going to get removed later on, so don't worry about that. And then I'm pinning the cuff to the lower edge of the pant legs, and I'm leaving out about 3 centimeters for my overlap of the cuffs later on. Making the gatherers and evening them out and pinning it down. Those 2 rows helps with making very nice and even gatherers later on. And here I'm sewing the cuffs and the gatherers together. It's a bit fiddly. And here I'm removing that second row of gathering stitches that was visible. As you can see, the gatherers turned out really nice. And then I'm turning the pants to the inside and folding over the seam allowance on the cuffs. And as I said, it would have been nice if I had made them like the waistband, but you know, too late now. And then I'm just basting that down so it will be nice and easy to hand stitch later on without catching on all needles. And then I'm stitching together the cuffs, and I'm making sure to stitch together that edge that is sticking out, using whip stitches over the edge, making it nice and secure, and then moving on to stitching down the edge of my cuffs on the inside. And then I'm going to put in 2 buttons on the cuffs. And I was lucky, I have some buttons from either my grandmother or my aunt, and I had some matching buttons where one button was a bit bigger than the other buttons, so that I used that for the waistband, and then the smaller buttons for the cuffs, and they match really nicely. And before I started putting on the buttons, the pants looked a lot like pajama pants, and that wasn't that was a bad sign, I thought. But as soon as the buttons went on, they stopped looking like PJs. So yeah, so that's the pants done, and here is a lovely reveal.
And the pants are done, and I'm so happy. I love how they look and how they feel. They are so comfortable, and I want to wear them all the time. They have been great during the autumn now, and it's just gotten a bit too cold for me to wear them as they are. I have to wear long johns underneath now, but they work great with them as well. So truly a great project. Sorry if you're hearing noise in the background. My cat is insisting on talking right now. Anyway, I already knew that the pattern for these ones would work since I already did the black ones. But I'm so proud of my pattern matching since that's the first time I've done that, and I think it looks fairly good on these pants. I'm really happy, especially at the pockets, how they line up there. Before I move on, I just want to thank my dad for the lovely photos and the reveal video he helped me take and letting me borrow his studio. Please check out his YouTube, Meatball on Wheels, and his Instagram, Flodquist Photo. I'm going to link them in the box below, so you can check him out. If you're interested in seeing how I made the trouser chains, you can watch them in my next video that's coming up next Sunday. I'm going to link it in the bio when it's up, and that's going to show the process of how I made them. And if you don't want to miss it, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified when it's up. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really love it if you hit the like button. And that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. May the stars shine upon your faces and have a glorious day. Thank you, and goodbye for now.